Hello and welcome to The Wise Senior. We're so glad you're here. This channel is all about sharing wisdom, real-life experiences, and practical advice to help you navigate the journey of aging with confidence. Today, we're discussing an important topic that many people face but rarely talk about. You won't want to miss these insights. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever thought about this? Do you or someone you know relate to this experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support our community of wise seniors. At 85, I made what I thought was the best decision for my future. I moved into a nursing home. At the time, it seemed like the right choice. My family reassured me that I would be well taken care of, that I wouldn't have to worry about cooking, cleaning, or managing my home alone. They promised comfort, security, and a chance to relax in my later years. I believed them. I trusted that this move would improve my quality of life. But once I got there, I quickly realized that the reality was far different from what I had imagined. Instead of feeling safe and cared for, I felt trapped. Instead of finding peace, I found frustration. And instead of enjoying my golden years, I found myself longing for the independence I had unknowingly given away. The biggest shock came in the form of routine. Before moving in, I had complete control over my days. I decided when to wake up, what to eat, when to take a walk, and how to spend my time. But inside the nursing home, everything followed a strict schedule, one that wasn't mine. Breakfast was served at a set time, whether I was hungry or not. The lights went out at night, whether I was tired or not. Even something as simple as stepping outside required permission and waiting for assistance. The autonomy I once took for granted vanished. I had entered a system where decisions were made for me, not by me. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. One of the most difficult things to accept was the loss of familiarity. My home was filled with memories, with little comforts that made life enjoyable. My favorite chair, the books I had collected over the years, the smell of my own cooking in the kitchen. In the nursing home, I was surrounded by unfamiliar walls, sterile furniture, and a constant reminder that this was not my home. I tried to adjust, but every morning I woke up feeling like a visitor in my own life. No matter how much I tried to settle in, I never truly felt at home. What I hadn't anticipated was how much I would miss the freedom to do simple things. Cooking my own meals, making a cup of coffee exactly how I liked it, or choosing what to wear for the day. These things may seem small, but they were part of what made life mine. Inside the nursing home, I had to accept what was given to me, even if I didn't like it. Over time, I realized I was no longer in control of my life. I was merely existing within the structure that had been created for me. If I could go back, I would have done everything possible to stay in my own home for as long as I could. I would have explored other options, sought more support, and found ways to maintain my independence. Moving into a nursing home was a decision I made too quickly, and I now live with the regret of not realizing what I was truly giving up until it was too late. One of the hardest adjustments after moving into a nursing home was the complete loss of independence. Before, I had full control over my life. I decided when to wake up, when to eat, how to spend my day, and when to step outside for fresh air. These decisions may seem small, but they were what made my life feel like my own. I never realized how much I valued these choices until they were no longer mine to make. Once I entered the nursing home, I quickly learned that my daily routine would now be dictated by someone else's schedule, one that I had no control over. Meal times were set, and whether I was hungry or not, I had to eat at the designated hour. If I wanted to sleep in, I couldn't, because morning routine started early. The lights in the facility were turned down at a certain time, regardless of whether I was ready to go to bed. If I wanted to go for a walk outside, I had to ask for permission. And even then, I had to wait until a staff member was available to assist me. What was once a simple pleasure, stepping outside whenever I pleased, became a privilege that required scheduling and approval. I remember one morning, I woke up feeling tired and wanted to stay in bed a little longer, but I couldn't. The aides were already coming in to help me get ready for the day, and I felt rushed, as if my personal comfort no longer mattered. It was a stark contrast to the life I had before, where I could wake up at my own pace, make myself a warm cup of coffee, and ease into the day on my own terms. That sense of control over my own time was gone, replaced by a rigid structure that I had to conform to. The loss of independence wasn't just about schedules, it was about dignity. I no longer had the freedom to handle basic personal choices without interference. Even selecting what to wear or what I wanted to eat became dependent on what was available rather than what I preferred. At home, if I had a craving for a specific meal, I could prepare it myself. In the nursing home, I had to accept whatever was served, even if I didn't like it. Slowly, I felt myself adjusting, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I stopped questioning the rules, stopped asking for alternatives, and simply learned to follow the routine. But with every small adjustment, I lost a part of myself. I was no longer living life on my own terms. I was just existing within a system that made decisions for me. If I had known how much independence I would lose, I would have fought harder to find alternatives. The freedom to live life on my own terms was something I had taken for granted, and once it was gone, I realized how much it truly mattered. One of the most painful realizations after moving into a nursing home was how quickly I began to feel forgotten. When I first arrived, my family assured me that they would visit often, and in the beginning they did. My daughter would stop by once a week, and my grandchildren would visit on the weekends. For a little while, it felt like I still had a connection to my old life, as if I was still a part of everything that was happening outside of these walls. But as time passed, the visits became less frequent. My daughter started calling instead of coming. My grandchildren got busy with school, work, and their own lives. Holidays that were once filled with laughter and family gatherings became quiet, and before I knew it, I was spending more and more time alone. At first, I tried to understand. Life gets busy, and I knew they had responsibilities. But what hurt the most was the feeling that I was no longer a priority. I had spent my entire life caring for them, raising them, supporting them through every challenge. And yet, as the days in the nursing home turned into weeks, then months, it seemed like my presence no longer mattered in the same way. It wasn't that my family had stopped loving me. I knew they still cared, but their lives moved forward while mine felt as though it had come to a halt. The loneliness became most noticeable in the evenings. I would sit in the common room and watch the door, hoping to see a familiar face. I wasn't the only one. Many of the other residents did the same, waiting for children and grandchildren who rarely showed up. The nurses and aides were kind, but they were not family. No matter how much they tried to fill the gaps, it wasn't the same as having someone who truly knew and loved you sitting beside you. I remember one particular evening when I debated calling my son. I missed hearing his voice, missed knowing what was happening in his life. But I hesitated. I didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to remind him that I was sitting here waiting for a visit that might never come. So I put the phone down, convincing myself that he would call when he had time. But the call didn't come that night, or the next. That's when it really hit me. I was no longer a part of their daily lives. I was living in a world separate from theirs, a world where time passed slowly and loneliness settled in like an old friend. The truth is, when you're out of sight, it's easy to become out of mind, and no matter how much your family loves you, once you're in a nursing home, it's easy for them to assume you're fine, that you've adjusted, that you don't need as much attention. But the reality is, we need it more than ever. If I had known how isolating it would feel, I would have thought twice before making the decision to move here. One of the hardest realizations after moving into a nursing home was how quickly I lost my sense of purpose. Before, my days were filled with small but meaningful responsibilities. Watering the plants, cooking my own meals, tidying up the house, and running errands. These tasks may have seemed insignificant, but they gave me a sense of structure, a reason to wake up in the morning and stay engaged with life. However, once I moved into the nursing home, all of those routines disappeared, and I was left with long empty days filled with nothing but waiting. At first, I thought it would be a relief not to have to worry about cooking or cleaning. I told myself that having everything taken care of would allow me to finally relax. But what I didn't realize was how much those little tasks had shaped my daily life. When meals were prepared for me, I lost the joy of cooking something I truly wanted to eat. When someone else did the cleaning, I lost the satisfaction of keeping my space just the way I liked it. I wasn't just giving up chores. I was giving up my independence and the small accomplishments that had once made each day feel worthwhile. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. I saw it in the other residents too. People who had once been active and full of life now spent their days sitting in common rooms, staring at the television or watching the clock, waiting for something, anything to happen. I remember one man, George, who had been a carpenter all his life. At home, he was always working on projects, fixing things around the house and keeping his hands busy. But here, there were no tools, no wood, no purpose for his skill. He told me one day, with a sad smile, "I feel like I don't know what to do with myself anymore." And I understood exactly what he meant. Without a sense of purpose, time moves differently. Days felt longer, blending into each other with no real distinction. It became easy to just sit and let time pass, to lose motivation to engage in anything new. The worst part was that this loss of purpose didn't just affect the mind, it affected the body too. The less we did, the weaker we became. Muscles that were once strong from everyday activities grew weaker from inactivity. Even simple things, like standing up or taking a few steps, became more difficult. It was as if our bodies started to believe we had no reason to move anymore. If I had known how much purpose mattered, not just for my mind, but for my overall well-being, I would have fought harder to maintain the routines that made me feel like myself. I would have found ways to stay engaged, to keep doing the things that gave my life meaning. Because without purpose, life in a nursing home becomes nothing more than waiting for the next meal, the next check-in, the next day to pass. And that is no way to live. Before moving into the nursing home, I was doing relatively well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could take care of myself, go for walks, and handle daily activities without assistance. I had my little routines: grocery shopping, stretching in the mornings, walking around my house to keep my legs strong. I believed that as long as I stayed active, I would maintain my mobility for years to come. But once I moved into the nursing home, everything changed, and my health declined faster than I ever expected. At first, it seemed like a luxury to have everything taken care of. I no longer had to cook, clean, or even walk far to get what I needed. Meals were brought to me, and if I needed anything, I could press a button and someone would come to assist me. But what I didn't realize was that the less I did for myself, the weaker I became. It started slowly. First, I noticed that I wasn't moving as much throughout the day. I spent more time sitting, watching television, or simply waiting for the next scheduled activity. Then, I started feeling stiffer in the mornings, and everyday movements, like standing up from a chair, became more difficult. I wasn't the only one experiencing this. I saw it happen to many others around me. People who walked in on their own 2 feet suddenly needed canes, then walkers, then wheelchairs. The more help we received, the more we seemed to need it. It was a cycle that crept up on us, making us dependent before we even realized what was happening. One of my neighbors, Alice, was a lively woman when she first arrived. She made it a point to take daily walks around the facility, insisting that she wasn't going to slow down just because of a number. But after a few months, I noticed she wasn't walking as much. Then she started using a walker. Soon after, she was in a wheelchair. One day, she looked at me and sighed. "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." That's exactly what it felt like, aging at an accelerated rate. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. The muscles I had spent years maintaining began to deteriorate simply because I wasn't using them. Even my posture changed, and I felt less steady on my feet. I knew that if I had been at home, I would have kept moving out of necessity. Here, in a place designed for convenience, it was too easy to let my body weaken without even realizing it. If I had known how quickly I would lose my strength, I would have made more of an effort to stay active. I would have fought harder to keep moving, to push myself even when I didn't feel like it. Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. One of the hardest things I didn't fully understand before moving into a nursing home was just how much privacy and dignity I would lose. At home, I had my own space. I could close my bedroom door when I wanted quiet, sit in my favorite chair with a book, and go about my day however I pleased. But in a nursing home, privacy is a luxury you don't always get to keep. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I was constantly being watched. Staff came in and out of my room at all hours. Scheduled room checks were routine, and shared spaces meant I was rarely ever alone. Even simple things, like getting dressed or using the bathroom, became tasks that sometimes required assistance. I knew the staff was just doing their job, but it's not easy to accept help for things you've done independently your entire life. At first, I tried to refuse, insisting that I could handle certain tasks on my own. But over time, it became clear that the nursing home had its own system, and I had to adjust to it, not the other way around. I lost control over my routines and had to follow their schedule, whether I liked it or not. One of the most difficult changes was the lack of choice in my daily life. Want to take a shower? You might have to wait until someone is available to help you. Need to use the restroom? Sometimes pressing the call button means waiting longer than you'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If you don't like what's on the menu that day, well, too bad. And then there was the issue of roommates. Not everyone gets a private room, and sharing a space with someone you didn't choose can be frustrating. I was fortunate to have a kind roommate, but I heard stories from others who weren't as lucky. Roommates who were loud, unclean, or even had cognitive issues that made sleep nearly impossible. No matter how much you try to make your room feel like home, it's never truly yours. The little things that once made me feel independent, like locking my door when I needed time alone, were no longer options. When people knock but don't always wait for an answer before coming in, when you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person, when your daily routines are dictated by a schedule you didn't create, it changes you. You start feeling less like yourself and more like just another name on a list. Dignity is a hard thing to lose, and I didn't realize how much of mine I'd have to surrender until I was already here. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had your entire life? Because once it's gone, it's hard to get back. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I'd give it a try, see how things went, and if I didn't like it, I could always leave. It felt like a decision I could reverse at any time. But what I didn't realize was just how hard it would be to get out once I was in. At first it seemed simple. If I didn't like it, I'd just go back home. But the reality wasn't that easy. My house had been sitting empty, and maintaining it from a distance became difficult. My children had already started making changes, selling things they thought I wouldn't need, even considering renting out the place. When I brought up the idea of returning, they hesitated. Are you sure you can manage on your own? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? They meant well, but their doubts made me doubt myself. And then there was the issue of my own physical decline. After months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk very far, I wasn't as strong as I used to be. The independence I once had started slipping away, making the idea of moving back home more difficult than I ever imagined. I wasn't as confident in my ability to live alone, and that fear kept me stuck. I met others who had the same experience. They thought they'd try the nursing home for a little while, only to realize that leaving wasn't as easy as they thought. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to adjust to life outside. Some people even lost the option entirely. Once their home was sold, or their savings were drained by the cost of care, there was no going back. That's the part nobody tells you. Moving in feels like a decision you can undo, but for most people, it isn't. The nursing home slowly becomes your whole world. And before you know it, the life you once knew starts feeling like a distant memory. Even if you want to leave, the financial costs of care and the emotional toll of losing your previous lifestyle create barriers you never expected. I never thought that simply walking away from this place would be so complicated, but it is. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that once you go in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you settle in, the barriers to leaving, whether financial, physical, or emotional, can be harder to overcome than you expect. If I had known how difficult it would be to leave, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home, explored more ways to get help without giving up my freedom, and made sure I truly needed to be here before making such a permanent move. Looking back, I don't regret growing older, but I do regret believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in, expecting comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. What I found instead was a world that slowly took away my independence, privacy, purpose, and even my sense of self. The promise of care and convenience came at a cost I never fully understood until it was too late. I wish I had known what I was giving up before I made the decision. I wish I had explored more alternatives that would have allowed me to stay in my own home for as long as possible. Nursing homes may be necessary for some people, especially those who need around-the-clock medical care. But for many, including myself, the transition was far more difficult than expected. I never realized how much I would miss the small freedoms, choosing my own meals, deciding how to spend my day, or even just sitting in my favorite chair with a book. I didn't anticipate how lonely I would feel when family visits became less frequent. I never thought that moving in would mean giving up my sense of purpose, feeling like I was simply waiting for the days to pass rather than truly living. Had I known what I know now, I would have done things differently. I would have explored every possible way to remain at home. Maybe I could have arranged for in-home care, relied more on my community, or made small modifications to my home to make it safer. I wish I had realized that there were other ways to get help without having to give up control over my life. The truth is, once you move into a nursing home, leaving is much harder than you think. Your home may no longer be available, your strength may decline, and the longer you stay, the more difficult it becomes to return to independent living. If you are considering a nursing home, whether for yourself or a loved one, please take the time to think carefully about what you are giving up. It may seem like the easiest or safest choice, but is it truly the best one? Are there alternatives that allow for more independence while still providing the support you need? Because once you move in, life changes in ways you can't fully understand until you experience it. My hope is that by sharing my regrets, others will have the opportunity to make a more informed choice. Don't rush into a decision without considering all the consequences. Think about what truly matters to you and explore every option before giving up the life you know. Because once it's gone, you may realize, as I did, that you didn't have to give it up so soon. One of the most important lessons from this reflection is that independence, purpose, and connection are essential to a fulfilling life. No matter our age, growing older doesn't mean giving up control over our daily lives, nor should it mean fading into the background of our families or communities. The biggest regret shared in this story isn't simply moving into a nursing home, it's realizing too late that there were other options. It's a reminder that we should explore every possibility to maintain our autonomy for as long as we can, whether through home modifications, community support, or asking for help from loved ones. Another key takeaway is the value of staying physically and mentally engaged. When we stop moving, we weaken. When we stop having purpose, we lose our spark. And when we stop connecting with others, we risk being forgotten. Aging is inevitable, but how we age is a choice. Instead of waiting for life to happen to us, we must take an active role in shaping our future, whether that means prioritizing our health, nurturing relationships, or advocating for our needs. The time to make these decisions is now before they are made for us.